The Supreme Court says Senator Lindsey Graham must testify before a Georgia grand jury investigating possible interference in the 2020 election. The Republican from South Carolina had asked the high court to block a subpoena. The justices said no. Georgia's Secretary of State claims that Graham is one of several Republicans who pressed him to reverse former President Trump's 2020 loss in that state. Graham had argued that a speech and debate clause in the Constitution protected him from being forced to testify. We're going to ask CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson about all of this. Jessica, so Chief Justice Roberts there's a couple of things going on in addition to Graham that I want to ask you about. And before I ask you the details of the case, I want to ask you to be professor here and talk about the Supreme Court also blocked a House committee from obtaining former President Trump's tax returns. So in that case and in this Graham case, you have this idea where the court is basically saying one branch shouldn't be allowed to investigate another branch. Remind us again why that balance is such a big deal.
I'm sure some of my students feel I am, in fact, playing professor. So why is it important? Because we have three separate branches of government. And the idea is that we have separation of powers. And we want the different branches to stay in their lane. There certainly are moments where there's concurrent jurisdiction, so to speak. But we don't want, for instance, the legislative branch reaching into the executive branch too much. Now, when it comes to the taxes, that's just a temporary administrative stay where the president lower courts have said President Trump has to turn over his taxes to the House Ways and Means Committee. He has gone to the Supreme Court, asked for an emergency appeal and said, basically, don't make me do it. John Roberts today just said, OK, I'm pushing pause while I wait to hear from both sides. It doesn't mean anything about whether or not the House Ways and Means Committee will ultimately get those taxes.
And he wants to hear from both sides, just to belabor this question of the bright lines between the different branches, because you don't want one gaining too much power over another. What does he want to hear from both sides?
Well, to your question, that they have a legitimate purpose, that it's not just a witch hunt, that they are, in fact, exercising a proper legislative reason when they're saying we want your taxes. Now, what they're saying is we need to make sure that our legislation is up to date when it comes to reviewing taxes, even the taxes of the president of the United States. Lower courts have actually said, yes, they are rationally and properly within their scope. They are within their lane. They're not overreaching. This is really a last-ditch effort by the former president saying to the Supreme Court, please put a stop to this. I don't want to turn my taxes over.
And leaving aside the specifics of this case and this specific president, you could imagine a case in which the legislature wanted to have control over a president and said, if you don't do what we want, we're going to tinker with your taxes. So that would be a case in which the power dynamic would be slopped over too much into the legislature. But that's not what's happening here. Let me ask you about Senator Graham. He was asking what was he asking of the Supreme Court, and why did they deny him?
Well, and to your other question, for a moment, it's such a good question, right? Because the legal issue should not be, do we want to see Donald Trump's taxes? The legal question is, do we want a congressional committee to be able to ask any president for his taxes? And that's really what the Supreme Court should be tackling. Now, to Lindsey Graham, what he has said is, I don't have to respond to a Fulton County in Georgia. I don't have to respond to grand jury questions in that case because I'm protected by something which you mentioned a few moments ago, the Constitution's speech and debate clause, which basically protects lawmakers in certain situations from having to answer questions about their legislative duties. What the lower courts have said and what the Supreme Court basically blessed today is that Lindsey Graham doesn't have to answer questions dealing with his legislative acts. Those are constitutionally protected, but he does need to answer questions about his involvement in these phone calls to the Georgia Secretary of State, where it looked like to a lot of people that the former president was basically asking the Georgia Secretary of State to find him 12,000 votes that simply didn't exist.
So, but Jessica, who's going to adjudicate that when it comes down to the questioning? So, for example, Senator Graham is basically saying, I was investigating. That's what you do as head of the Judiciary Committee, and that's part of speech and debate. And so all of this conversation was me investigating. Who ultimately adjudicates that when he sits down with the prosecutors down in Georgia?
So 2 tracks. The first track is that lower courts have said, Senator Graham, there's plenty that you can there's plenty that you can answer that would not touch your legislative acts. There's plenty that you can answer with respect to your phone calls and your apparent attempts to ask whether or not there will be, to be involved in election interference. That's what they're really investigating here. So today, the court has said you don't get blanket immunity. But what's going to happen is that on a case-by-case basis, when it comes to the questioning by the grand jury in Fulton County, that each one of those questions, he could lodge a separate objection and say that's covered. So we could still see that separate questions in this grand jury testimony could go to a lower court to determine whether or not they would be constitutionally protected under the speech and debate clause, or whether they fall outside of that clause and he has to respond.
So we may have more rounds of this to go. Jessica Levinson, thank you for letting me play law student and for walking us through all of that. Appreciate it. Thank you.